It's now January 1999. Christmas leave came and went, and before I knew it, I was back in Hobsonville camp in Auckland. Whilst in camp and heading towards the steel fence that surrounded the New Zealand SAS headquarters at the time, I remember seeing the guys I would be on cycle with, already formed up in 3 ranks outside the compound gates. And here I was, just showing up, being dropped off by my mum no less. We had travelled from Manurewa, South Auckland, where my mum lived at the time, so getting to Hobsonville was a bit of a trip. From memory, I think I was still on time, but I think the boys were all extra early. To be expected though, day 1 of cycle, want to make a good impression, be there nice and early, don't be late, don't be the last one. I thought we'd left with plenty of time to be there from Manurewa to to Hobsonville, but maybe we didn't. I'm not sure if one of the directing staff was already there with the guys when I arrived. If he was, I can't remember who it was, but I remember vaguely forming up with everyone else and basically just waiting for instructions. So maybe there wasn't a directing staff member there at the time. I thought to myself, shame, last one to form up, brought to camp by my mum, and now she was waiting outside the compound in her car because it had my gear in it. The thing was though, my mum needed to get to work that day as well, but she waited because my kit was in her car. We were instructed to enter the compound after some time standing outside, where from memory it felt like we were in there for a while. From that point, I can't recall exactly whether my mum pushed the button at the compound gate, saying that she needed me to come and get my gear out of the car so she could go to work, or if I actually remembered and asked the staff if I could go and get my stuff out of my mum's car because she needed to go to work. Whichever one it was, the directing staff didn't seem very happy about it. So much for being the grey man, I thought to myself. I shot out to the car, apologising to my mum when I got there. I quickly grabbed my gear out of the car and she didn't say a word. She looked angry and simply drove off as soon as I got my gear out of the car. No goodbye, no see you later, no I love you son. I learned at a young age that my mum doesn't like to be late for work, and now she was about to make a trip back to South Auckland from Hobby to Bluebird Foods in Manukau where she worked at the time. I went from one scowling directing staff to an angry mum, and here I was, a 20-year-old starring on day 1 of the cycle. I remember saying 3 things in my head that day. First, please don't let me get kicked off cycle on the first day. The second, please let my mum get to work on time. And the third, please don't let me get kicked off cycle on the first day. Thankfully, I wasn't kicked off cycle on day 1, but I have no idea if my mum was late for work that day. To be honest, I don't recall ever asking my mum if she was late to work that day. I figure if she was, it must have been alright, as she went on to work at Bluebird Foods for nearly 20 years. I could imagine the directing staff laughing and talking about that young fella, me in this case, who showed up with his mum. Anyway, the rest of that day, and to be honest, large parts of my cycle were pretty hazy, but I'll do my best to speak on things that I can remember, and that I feel like I can speak on without causing any concern or harm. Apologies in advance if there are large gaps in this story. Perhaps those I was on cycle with might one day plug some gaps and or correct my memories in the comments below. After squaring away some admin and being issued with a barrack room, we were quickly reminded that we were still nothing, that we were to double march anywhere and everywhere while in camp, moving to or from any location, and that we were to come to attention when speaking to any member of the unit and call them staff. I remember just zoning in on the core messages I was hearing at that moment and breaking them down for me. Remember, I said to myself, run everywhere, stand to attention when speaking, and call everyone staff. Got it. From memory, I felt like I used this zoning in method throughout my time on cycle, and especially for things that I wanted to do, which was pretty much the whole of cycle. I know I also zoned out as well when it came to things that I didn't feel were worth my time. But during the cycle, I couldn't think of anything that I didn't want to do, even if I knew it was going to be hard or just flat out miserable, simply because I understood that every course we were to undertake, every lesson we were to receive, and our ability to apply the teachings was a necessary part of the process if I wanted to serve in this unit. The first course I remember us doing on cycle was the basic parachuting course, using what I think was called a T10 parachute, or roundies, jumping out the side doors mostly, including a few ramp jumps, with our static lines connected to the cable in the Hercules aircraft at the time. I remember being super excited about it. It was one of those courses I thought every infantry soldier wanted to do, and I couldn't wait to have my chance. But first we had the ground training to complete. That part of the training I found surprisingly more physically demanding than I thought it would be. In my head, we were just jumping out of an aeroplane. followed by a slow and gentle landing on the ground under a canopy, just like on TV, I thought. Next minute, my uniform is soaked in sweat every day of the course, and new bumps and bruises are showing up on my body as we constantly drill the infamous para roll, or parachuting roll. Side left, side right, forward left, rear left, then progressing to dropping off various heights and performing the same drills, to swinging off the hanging wheel thing, and again performing the same drills over and over again, to then conducting the same drills as we jumped off the back of a moving unimog, then onto various drills with and without the harness, including the initial checks, avoiding collisions, to emergency drills if needing to deploy our reserve chute, and more. Then onto the actions, drills and checks in the mock-up aircraft, including the footwork, rear, front, those drills, those commands, those words still resonate in my head. To conducting tower drills, whereby we jumped out of a tower well connected to a wire cable and then put everything together under the watchful eye of the instructors. Hence why I personally found the para course more physically demanding than I expected. Myself and some of the guys at the end of a long day would laugh and say, they didn't say anything about this in the catalogue. Then we'd proceed to mock each other for looking uncoordinated during the ground training, especially when it came to the para rolls. You get some guys ending up with nicknames given to them like Tumbleweed due to tumbling along the ground when they land. Some guys being called Spud due to landing like a sack of spuds when they connect with the ground. At some stage, I think all of us were called Sack, affiliated closely with the Spud nickname, but usually associated with the male genital area, otherwise known as nutsack, when bouncing off the ground. A lot of times, though, we were probably just called the usual idiot, ball bag, F-wit, and so on. Whenever the staff weren't looking, we'd be laughing at each other and referring to each other by the name they were just called when we were allowed a break or getting a feed from the mess. Hey, can you pass me the salt, you sack? Oh, don't you start, ball bag, get your own bloody salt, and so on. The morale was high though, and it was a great time. From memory, there were a few badge members from the unit and non-unit members who were instructing us during the para course, but I mainly remember one of the badged NZSAS operators during that course, Big Jim Picky, probably because he was so kind to us. Not even. He hammered us day in and day out, making sure our drills were squared away before we stepped foot onto the actual aircraft. I definitely wasn't zoning out during that training, but seriously, his firm, no-nonsense approach helped ensure that we were all sorted and competent prior to exiting the aircraft for real. Even though Big Jim was a no-nonsense and experienced member of the unit, and I personally never knew or had the privilege to get to know Jim at all, he reminded me of that uncle in the family who looks and sounds grumpy, who always tries to push you to do more, but who also has a cheeky and gentler side that only reveals itself to those who have earned it. However, the simple reality for me was that he was not to be trifled with, and whatever he said to do, my response and actions were simple. Get my heels together, say yes, staff, and then go and do what he said as quickly as I could. Fast forward to my first jump out of the aircraft, which was without equipment, otherwise referred to as clean skin. I think I was in the first stick and around about the third or fourth in the lineup to exit the aircraft. We had some support staff on the para course with us, and one of them was a female medic attached to the unit. I think her surname was McDonald. Anyway, my memory is that she was the first one to be jumping out the door of the first stick. As I sat there in the aircraft and we're getting ready to take off, I'm recalling all the ground training drills we covered. And I remember the instructors saying, when it's time to get out the door, effing get your backside out the door. If you don't, I'll be throwing you out the door. They used more colourful language than that, but you get the idea. They made it clear during training that there was to be no balking or hesitation at the door come go time. And all I knew was, I didn't want to be the one who hesitates at the door. As we get the relevant calls and commands, I can't help but wonder if the female medic on the course will balk at the door when it's time to jump. We conduct the relevant self-checks and buddy checks and stand ready to move towards the side doors. We all check in, starting from the back of the stick, and tap the person in front of us, letting them know that we're okay. 7 okay, 6 okay, 5 okay, 4 okay, 3 okay, 2 okay. And then the final person at the front of the stick, 1 okay, stick ready for action. With the thumbs up given to the instructor and the crew by the door, we then get the signal action stations and we start advancing to the door. Rear, front, rear, front, rear, front, rear, front, and then a pause. The first person in the stick is now in the doorway, Her static line cable is clear, and she's waiting for the green light to start the stick off and punch out the door. I've got a fairly clear view of her as I'm only 3 or 4 back in the stick at this stage, and I'm still wondering, is she going to punch herself out the door, or will she be pushed out? The green light comes, and without hesitation she goes rear front and punches out the door like a parachuting veteran. In an instant, while carrying out my drills like everyone else in the stick and making my way towards the side door, I think to myself, if there was any doubt that I might hesitate at the door, it has 1000% disappeared now. There is no way in hell I'm hesitating after seeing the female medic punch herself out the door. The flow is smooth and efficient. It comes to me, I go rear front, hand over my static line cable, and then the following rear front, I'm punching outside the door. I feel the power of the slipstream as I'm blowing away down the side of the aircraft I've just exited. I start going through my drills with my arms placed over the top of my reserve chute, which is on my chest, and while being blown around in mid-air, completely disorientated as my chute deploys, I begin the count. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, check. With my arm still placed on top of my reserve, I look up to see my canopy has inflated. First tick in the box, and sigh of relief. Because my canopy looks good, I can now take my arms and hands off my reserve and reach up and grab on my forward risers and begin the rest of my drills, calling out to the front, over the left, over the right, under the left, between the legs, to the front. So my head and eyes going back to the front. While calling out those drills, we're checking to make sure that we're not too close to anyone else in those areas for safety reasons. I was clear of other jumpers and all looked good, so I didn't need to steer to a clear piece of sky as per the drills taught because I was already clear. As I descended, I just needed to be aware of which way I was drifting, so I could execute the perfect parachuting roll as taught and thrashed into us by Big Jim Picky. Before I knew it, the moment of truth arrived. I was about to land. I could see myself drifting side left from memory. As I got closer, I began bracing, feet, knees and legs together, toes up so I can land flat-footed and perform the side left para roll I thought I had mastered. Next minute, I connect with the ground, and instead of performing a nice side left para roll, I execute a spud roll, landing feet, then bum, then back, and my feet go up in the air towards my head, nearly doing a backward roll, before bringing my feet back down in front of me into the ground. I think to myself, get up quickly before anyone sees. And then I start cracking up to myself and looking around to try and spy if anyone saw me and or if I could see anyone else having a spectacular landing like I just had. I saw a few other spuds like me come in and land the same way. Feet, bum, back, almost a backward roll, but not quite, then getting up quickly and starting to bundle up the chute. The experience was awesome, but I found myself again saying this wasn't in the brochure. That landing was crap and felt hard as. The landings I've watched on TV look smooth and they stay on their feet. I would come to realise later that there's a big difference between the basic static line course and the parachutes used and the nice soft landing, cool looking, flipping off the back ramp freefall course or parachutes. All the spud, sack, tumbleweed, idiot and occasional para-roll landings aside, I love that course and that aspect of what might be needed from a soldiering perspective down the track. It was a fairly standard progression during the course, a few clean skin jumps, then jumps with webbing and weapon, and onto jumps with full kit by day and night. At each stage there were a few more drills and actions that needed to be taught, and which we needed to be able to demonstrate on the ground to the satisfaction of the instructors prior to going up in the aircraft. Eventually we all managed to get through the course and qualify. I don't recall anyone suffering a major injury and needing to be removed from the course. We had heard stories of some people who had broken their leg during previous courses. I didn't know if those stories were true, but I wasn't fazed, even though it was always in the back of my mind. But thankfully that didn't happen. From there, I think we might have started preparations for the combat survival course. Regardless, that's what I'm going to talk about next because that's what's popped into my head. Again, hazy memory, but I remember a camp/classroom phase for about a week whereby we received theory lessons in camp about survival and interrogation methods, etc. During that phase, we were also expected to make what would be our clothing for the top half of our bodies anyway. Essentially, we were making a large jacket-type covering out of hessian or sandbags, lined with some parachute silk material. That stage of the course was pretty easy. We were in camp, still getting meals from the mess, I believe, and doing a bunch of theory lessons. No real dramas. The second phase was in the Coromandel area, I'm pretty sure. Here we were instructed to strip down completely naked as the directing staff went through our items, checking for any contraband. After the checks were complete, we got dressed, and now we would start applying the classroom theory work practically. However, we still received a few more in-field lessons as well as we went. During this phase, we had a handful of other guys on the course with us who were not part of the cycle. I think we had a couple of soldiers from the infantry, 1 or 2 from the Air Force, and we had at least 1 foreign soldier because he was in my group. I think he might have been from Malaysia. I remember he was extremely lean, polite, and soft-spoken, and he cooked up the best rice I've ever tasted to this day with water and the fat from a chicken we had. I have no idea what he did or how he did it. I wish I had been paying attention, but it was yum as. Maybe it was just because I was starving at that time like the rest of us, but whatever he did with the rice that day in a rusty-looking can that we had, it was delicious. During the second phase, I can't forget about Mary's orchard. She was a local to the area from memory, and she took us for a lesson or two about the local fauna and flora and the local bush tucker we could eat if or when necessary. But truth be told, I mostly remember her fruit trees and being mesmerized by them as my stomach growled, grumbled, and said, "Eat them." There were a few creeks and streams in the area, and there was actually some old-looking fruit that we found in the streams from time to time. Needless to say, I and some of the lads ate those up. We tried looking for eels, found none. We tried setting snares, caught nothing. Went foraging, found bugger all. And with each passing day, we found our energy depleting, but maintaining morale as we laughed at each other, telling one another how feeble and weak the other person looked. Yep, we also planned missions to infiltrate Mary's orchard and do a raid as well, even though the directing staff gave us clear instructions not to go onto her property and to leave her fruit alone. We got our heels together and responded saying, "Yes, staff," then side-eyeing each other when the staff weren't looking. A look that expressed the, let's say, who dares wins mentality. Or perhaps it was just the I'm effing starving face, so let's see and hopefully we don't get caught. During that phase, there was the implementation of building shelter, starting fire, purifying water, going out foraging, setting and checking traps to try and catch food, and various lessons on killing, skinning, gutting, and cooking game to eat. Making a blood cake from one of the animals, which basically meant capturing the blood that was spurting out of one of the animals' necks we had killed into a container of some kind, allowing it to congeal or coagulate and turn into a jelly-like texture, creating a blood cake. Then, as required, eating some of the blood cake. The theory being, at the time, at least we were told from memory, there are minerals and nutrients in the blood cake that we can use when sources of energy are in short supply. Yummy, not. Eating worms, preserving food, navigation using the stars, and learning to not waste the animal was all part of the course. Once that aspect of the theory and practical training was done, it was time to conduct a trial run of other theory lessons we received while in camp to do with resistance to interrogation. That meant we were given some information by one of the directing staff and told to evacuate the area we were in and make our way to an agent RV location where we would receive more information and potential supplies. This would continue for a few days while being actively hunted by some of the badge members and culminating in being captured and going in the bag for an undetermined amount of time. Once that happened, we would be exposed and tested under duress to see if we could conduct ourselves in accordance with our training received so far. We had all received important information, but now we're wet, cold, hungry, and tired. Were we still able to keep our wits about us by not disclosing any important agent information? At the same time, take in and continue to collect as much information as possible about the enemy, their surroundings, once captured, etc. This was the warm-up to the final phase, which took place in Waiouru. Only those on cycle took part in the final phase. The others who were not on cycle finished their course after the second phase and returned to their units. In Waiouru, we were in small teams, same as what we were in the Coromandel. The weather was crap when we were released, after having been given our first lot of instructions and coordinates for our first agent RV. I remember we left, it was late at night, it was howling with wind and rain, and we got given supplies, not supplies in terms of food, but tools, resources in the forms of maps, which were different scale, which were black and white, and which were probably not really that current in terms of where we were at that time. During that phase, we would be on the run, relying on each other, our wits, and the training we had received and or accumulated over time by the time we started that course. While avoiding being detected and or captured by the hunter force, which consisted of members from one of the infantry battalions, I think perhaps a rifle company or two were part of it. I'm not sure if they were from 1st Battalion or 2nd 1st Battalion, to be honest. Not that it mattered. They were enemy, and I didn't want to be caught by them. Included in the hunter force was the Air Force and their helicopters, including the dogs. Well, I suppose when we had an Air Force at that time. And a section or platoon of Fijian infantry soldiers who were in New Zealand at the time as part of a training exercise, I think. I thought to myself, this is frickin' awesome. We ended up covering a lot of ground during that final phase. Multiple agent RVs. Our small team got bumped and separated a couple of times, once at night close to an agent RV and the second during the day, which forced us to go through our RV procedure to try and link back up. Some of the guys got captured, some of us didn't. I remember Mids and I sprinting away from ground troops who had spotted us and who quickly called the helos onto our position. We ran straight down a steep-as bush-filled re-entrant. Luckily, we didn't injure ourselves in the process. We continued to move as fast as we could through that area while we could see the troops above frantically trying to locate us. Sometimes we'd have to stop and pause and just lie there, and I was thinking we were fully exposed and they're going to see us, but somehow we managed to evade them. One part of that phase, Mids and I needed to get back up and over a rise or up and over a spur line and down the other side, and the helicopter was buzzing around. We started making our way. We got nearly to the top where it was flat and open and exposed, and I thought we were clear. Then we heard a chopper coming and we just flopped to the ground and stayed as still as we could. We could see the soldiers sitting on the skirting or sitting on the side of the helicopter in the Huey, looking out the side, looking for us, and we could see them clearly, but it looked like they didn't make any eye contact with us, and the helicopter just carried on and flew past. I thought we had been spotted for sure, but it turns out they didn't see us. The helicopter buzzed off, then we got up and sprinted over that spur and down the other side and managed to evade capture. I was so stoked that we got away. We eventually reunited with our team and made our way to the final RV. While we were at the final RV, waiting for extraction, there was some confusion by the person who received the information about the pickup at the final RV. He wasn't sure if he was told to flag it down and then jump in, or if the agent said the tailgate will be down, indicating it was safe to jump in. Regardless, although we were at the final RV in time and we saw the vehicle, which we now realise was the actual vehicle that we were supposed to hop on, we missed the nighttime pickup in exfil. As a result, the exfil vehicle returned to the extraction point again during the day, and we boarded the truck to be extracted, as we waited there and didn't leave because we didn't have any other instructions or any other RV points to go to. So we assumed that they would come back again because they may have thought that we didn't meet or get to the extraction point in time the first time. Our extraction vehicle was ambushed, and we were unceremoniously removed from the back of the Unimog by what sounded and looked like the Fijian infantry soldiers who were in country for some training. There were some of the New Zealand battalion soldiers as well from memory, but that was a bit of a blur, and it didn't help that we were getting yelled at and slapped around a bit. I remember we were forced to the ground, face down, and our arms spread out straight to the side of our bodies in line with our shoulders. And the Fijian soldiers were yelling, "Bums up, bums up." I thought, as did members of our team, that they were saying bums up, as in backsides up. But then I thought, surely they don't want us to put our bums up in the air. Then they continued yelling, "Bums up, bums up." So I and a number of others in our team stuck our bums up in the air, to which we were swiftly given a whack, and then the soldiers began to physically turn the palms of our hands up towards the sky. Then the penny dropped. Palms up, not bums up. It was just a misunderstanding due to the Fijian accent I put it down to. Bums up versus palms up. Or what would have been easier to understand, at least in hindsight anyway. Turn your arms and hands over so your palms are facing towards the sky. But I guess palms up is quicker. Anyway, we were then blindfolded and thrown back into the Unimog, laying face down and taken to a location for further questioning, aka interrogation, for an undetermined period of time. The course finally came to an end, and we went through a bit of a debriefing process as part of the end of course. We got cleaned up, hopped into a bus or a Unimog, and started making our way back to Hobsonville in Auckland. I think we stopped off in Tokoroa to get a feed, which was awesome. And just like that, another course done and dusted on the cycle. I don't personally recall us getting much time off over the entire duration of the cycle, those 8 to 10 months. My now wife and I remember about 2 or 3 short weekend trips I made from Auckland to Palmerston North at the time, during that time that I was on cycle. And I think at least 2 of those were with 2 of the other guys that I was on cycle with. Both of them were travelling back to Palmy and were kind enough to give me a ride. I recall at least one other time where I was catching a flight and one of the other guys who had a motorbike gave me a ride to the airport from Hobby. I was already pushing it close, and ultimately I missed my flight due to getting to the Auckland airport in Manukau late. Not due to my mate's riding of the bike. Man, when he was riding, I felt like we were flying. We just didn't finish work in time for me to get from Hobby to the airport in Manukau, so I could make my flight. So anyway, I caught a flight the next day, and it was still worth the trip. Those 2 or 3 short weekend leave moments with Helen felt like magic. I didn't worry or think about any courses past or coming up. I was just glad to be hanging out with her. As much as I wanted to stay with her nearing the end of those times together, I was able to switch back into cycle mode. And when I did that, I always looked forward to getting back to work. I don't remember the exact order of the courses we did, but I know at various stages we did some medical training courses, we did a communications training course including learning and using Morse code and other coding methods and tools for sending more secure messages back to base. We did some helo rappelling and swarm roping or fast roping, demolitions course and use of explosives, small arms and heavy weapons training, method of entry, manual and explosive, commonly referred to as MOE, or the term breaching is more used these days, I think. Close quarter battle, CQB, learning hand-to-hand fighting techniques, including getting sprayed with pepper spray and going through the kill house filled with CS gas without the mask on, or having to take the mask off, start giving the big 4 or giving our name, rank, serial number, date of birth, and then having to run through the rest of the kill house to get out the other end. I remember coughing and spluttering at the end once I got outside. Progressing on the counter-terrorism training and room combat. And we can't forget the patrol procedures course, learning how to operate in the bush. And between all of those courses, which ran for several weeks at a time and usually ran back to back, we had a couple of days off in between to rest up before refocusing and going again onto the next one. Again, I personally thought this was awesome. I won't run through all of those incredible courses and training moments, but I might speak on some of them briefly either during this share or a separate upload. I will share an important event which impacted others and myself ultimately during my time on the cycle, which I've shared in a separate video already. I think the name of that video, or the title, is around how I almost went to prison instead of joining the SAS. From memory, I think that's the name of the video that I did. Around May, possibly June 1999, heck, it might have even been earlier in the year, I was involved in an altercation with a civilian whilst at a birthday party for one of the guys on our cycle. At that party, our cycle cohort was there, and there were a number of civilians as well. Everything was going well. However, I ended up getting angry with a civilian at the party after he punched me in the face as I was trying to calm him down. Short version here, I saw red, got angry and reacted with violence, but probably reacted with too much in hindsight. The guys were there and saw me out on the driveway fighting with this guy, but they didn't know why or what had happened. A few of the guys grabbed me and removed me from the guy I was fighting with. We were separated and that guy looked like he was leaving. However, I saw him coming back, so I went out to meet him again and we got into it again. Again, the guys grabbed me and separated us. The police came and were on scene at some point not long after the second round had been broken up. I acted like an idiot, answering back to the police. The guys got me back to the barracks and the police came by and picked me up and took me in for questioning early that same day, as the incident happened early hours in the morning of that same day. So it must have happened maybe around midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, something like that. It was still pitch black anyway, and by the time I got picked up, it was just sort of, early morning, sun just starting to come up. When I was taken in, I gave a video statement to the police at the time and was later told that I should never give a statement to the police without a lawyer present. I just thought, man, just tell the truth. It was a couple of guys who got into a fight. I didn't think it was a big deal. Unfortunately, the guy I had the fight with ended up in hospital with a fractured skull, a broken nose and a broken jaw from memory. I think he had a few other injuries as well. And as a result, I was being charged with wounding with intent to cause grievous bodily harm. And I was informed that that came with a maximum 6-year prison sentence at the time. Needless to say, I saw my entire career and dream of serving in the SAS disappear in an instant. And to be fair, I was probably in a bit of shock. I don't know what happened after that or how I was released and got back to camp, but I was. I remember being spoken to by the lawyer that the unit had engaged to come and support me, like I was a little child. I probably looked like one, to be fair. He asked why I gave a statement to the police. I told him honestly the same thing. I thought just tell the truth about what happened. I thought I might get in trouble, but never imagined I could lose my whole career over it. It was just two guys who had a fight, and I didn't start it. I got angry after being punched in the face. I never thought I'd be facing 6 years prison for having a fight with the person who punched me in the face first. That aside, that was my potential reality. I don't remember how much time passed, but I know the lawyer tried to have my charge of GBH, grievous bodily harm, reduced to common assault. That was unsuccessful. I'm sure there was a lot of work happening behind the scenes, work that I had unnecessarily created for everyone. The cycle continued and I was still part of the cycle. The requirements hadn't changed. I was expected to meet the minimum standards and pass each course, just like everyone else. We still had several months worth of cycle left to go and I knew I still needed to stay focused, even though I also knew that I might be doing all of this for nothing. The weight and the burden of trying to follow all the instructions and pass each course as well as I could, or at least to the minimum standard, while having the burden and weight of a potential 6-year prison sentence hanging over my head, was difficult to work through. It was probably one of the most difficult times in my life at the time as a 21-year-old, having that weight and burden hanging over my head. At one stage during the cycle, and while still waiting for my court appearance, I was told to report to one of my leaders on my cycle, an officer in the regiment who was our training officer, a really good man who was there for me and someone I had and still have a lot of respect for. During my meeting with him, I was expecting to be kicked off cycle, but thankfully I wasn't. I ended up seeing the meeting as a real boost and it gave me hope. Essentially, I was told that if I didn't go to jail and if I continued to pass each course on cycle, I would be badged with my cohort, but I would be on an additional probation period. I was stoked because up until that point, I was in a pretty low space mentally, even though I tried not to show it. Coming out of that meeting really lifted my spirits. I felt an immense amount of gratitude and I felt like I could focus more clearly on completing the cycle in each course, even though the final decision on my punishment was still yet to be decided. My day in court came and the only reason I didn't go to jail is because the guy I had the fight with was in court that day. And basically he let the judge know that he didn't want to see me go to jail or lose my career over what happened. He said it was two guys who had a fight and he came off second best. He shouldn't have punched me and I shouldn't have lost my temper the way I did. The judge checked a few details with him and then delivered my sentence. I received a 12-month suspended sentence, a fine, and had to pay for the medical bills of the guy I had the fight with, referred to as the victim. I don't mind saying, tears ran down my face as I stood in the dock, and I wanted to see the guy I fought with to thank him. He was kind, gracious, and humble enough to wait for me and allowed me to thank him and to say I was sorry. With tears in my eyes, I still thanked him, apologised, and thanked him again. I don't remember what he said to me. I just felt an overwhelming sense of relief and gratitude, like a huge weight had just been lifted off my chest, and I could breathe and dream again. My training officer who had spoken to me a few days or weeks earlier was there the entire time. I was so grateful to see him there. Even if I went to jail that day, it meant a lot to me to see that he would take time out of his busy schedule to be there. I never acknowledged or thanked him for that personally. Sorry about that, Sam, and thank you very much. Honestly, I wish I had the wherewithal to acknowledge that at the time, but I didn't. Fast forward and cycle continued. I ended up completing and passing all the remaining courses that were part of our cycle that year. Then, a day or two before the badging ceremony, we all received our sandy beret with the winged dagger, or the flaming sword of Excalibur, stitched into the beret. We received instruction to shape and shave it prior to the badging parade, so we didn't look like a bunch of guys wearing funny-looking chef's hats on our heads for the big day. I remember our cohort being in the barracks, shaping and wearing the beret, myself included, stoked and excited that the moment was only a day or two away. Myself and the guys in the barracks were smiling from ear to ear. I hadn't said anything to anyone. I don't think any of us had, as we were probably just still stoked about finally being able to touch the beret, let alone put it on our heads. We had finished shaping them, and we were instructed to put our names on a piece of masking tape inside the beret, so they would know whose beret was whose when it came time to call out our names to come forward and receive the beret. Once we had done that, we were to hand our berets in to our course leaders, which we did. I don't remember how long it was after our berets were handed in when I got told to head up to the compound to meet with my training officer and training warrant officer in the office. I rushed up to the compound, entered and went straight to the office, not expecting the news I ended up receiving. I was told that I wouldn't be getting badged with the rest of my cohort the next day because of what had happened. Instead, I would be sent back to battalion for 6 months, and then I could come back halfway through the following year's cycle, continue with the cycle next year, and all going well, if I pass, end up getting badged with that cohort. I'll be honest, in an instant, I had a bunch of colourful language flooding my head, combined with anger, hurt, and personally feeling like I was lied to the entire time. I can't remember what I was asked by my two leaders in that room. It's all a bit hazy, but I remember saying words to the effect of, "No, I'm not coming back. I'm going to go and join the Australian SAS." I knew that they would have connections with SASR, but I didn't care. In that moment, I was adamant I wasn't coming back. I couldn't reconcile what I had been told would happen earlier with what was now my reality. So in my anger, immaturity, and lack of humility to simply take the hit, I said, "Nah, I'm not coming back." To the unit's credit, when I rejected the offer, the training officer and warrant officer, I think they escalated it to the unit regimental sergeant major after trying to get me to change my mind. I was then called into the RSM's office and told the same thing. He was made aware of my response that I was going to join SASR, and he asked me if that was what I planned to do. I said, "Yes, sir." I remember the RSM taking a bit more time with me and explaining that it was only 6 months and that time would go by quickly, and that all going well, that beret over there he pointed to will be yours. I had been told during this period that there had been other men who had been sent back to their units for a stand-down period for committing lesser offences than what I had done. I personally, though, didn't care about the situation of those other men because I was so focused on me and my situation and what I had been told. To be honest, I couldn't care less about what had happened to some other guys that I didn't know. At that stage, I simply wasn't buying it. I thought to myself, I've already been lied to once, you're not going to trick me again. And I stuck to my response. I won't be coming back. I'm heading to Australia. Well, sometime after that, I then get called to the commanding officer's office, where from memory, the previous leaders I had just met with were also in the room. The CO then proceeds to say the same things I've already heard, and my decision isn't changing. I remember hearing words to the effect of, "Well, there's no guarantee you'll pass the Australian selection anyway." And that lit a fire in me like you wouldn't believe. The disappointment and sadness I was feeling for myself at that time almost instantly turned into rage. I couldn't wait to get out of the office. I couldn't wait to go back to my infantry battalion and start training for Australia. If they had sent me back that same day, I would have gladly gone. However, I was still there, helped with the preparations for the guys' badging parade, simple things, placing out seats for those family members who had been invited by the guys, some basic cleaning up, etc. When the badging ceremony started, I stood off to the side behind the family guests who came there to see their family members receive their beret and corb out. I'll be honest, I was really happy for the guys because I knew how hard they worked and how good they were, but I didn't want to be there. Opposite where I was standing, on the other side of the compound, were the already badged members of the unit, standing in their ranks, berets and corb outs on. One by one, the boys from the cycle I was on were called up. Each one marched up to the person who would present them with their beret. They went through the relevant protocols and returned to their position in the line. Once that process was conducted, there were a few words. I can't remember what was said, as I didn't care because I wasn't in the line. Then the badge members who were standing opposite me on the other side of the compound turned parade ground, made their way to the newly badged members, filing through and shaking each person's hand. I thought that was very cool for the guys and a really nice way of the unit recognising the work each one of them had put in. Heading back to battalion, I was embarrassed and felt like I let everyone down. Guys there said I should go back, but I was far too stubborn to listen to them. The final attempt I recall the unit making to try and convince me to come back halfway through the following cycle, which was in 2000, at the end of the combat survival course which was currently running. My battalion was part of the hunter force looking for the guys who were on the final phase of the course, there in Waiuru. I was now taking the guys in and out of the interrogation rooms and watching them. I knew some of the guys on the cycle as we were on selection together in 1998, but some of them had to wait until 2000 before they were allowed onto Cycle to allow them more time to gain more soldiering experience in an infantry unit. At the end of that course, 2 of the leaders from the unit, who I recognised from my discussions with them and their officers up in Auckland, sat me down outside next to one of the vehicles. We were in Helwan camp at the time. They asked me if I was coming back in a couple of months' time. To be honest, I was surprised that the offer was still on the table. Without hesitation, I said, "No, staff, I'm going to Australia." They went on to say, "It's a lot to throw away. Are you sure?" Again, no hesitation. I said, "Yes, I'm sure, staff." And that was that. Decisions and choices. We all have to make them eventually, and whatever decision we make, we need to back ourselves to get after it. On reflection, the unit did the right thing in my case. They handled it fairly, and they sincerely tried to convince me to come back. They kept the door open, they never closed it on me, and they tried to explain the reasons why. I think they realized after the fact that maybe they shouldn't have said to me what they said and then changed the decision. But the unit and the people within it, although they're good people, they're not perfect, and mistakes happen. Perhaps what happened in my case was a mistake, or perhaps it was a test. Either way, the unit has standards to uphold, and they upheld them in my case. Maybe they thought I'd change my mind once I calmed down and got back to battalion. Who knows? What is evident is that I personally lacked the humility at the time to take the hit. I couldn't bring myself to suck it up and then go back because I wrongly felt like I had already earned my place when I hadn't. The simple truth is, the unit tells me or tells you when you've earned your place, not the other way around. It just took me a few years to acknowledge and realize that. Yep, I could have gone back instead of being a sookie bubba about the revised consequence, but I didn't. If I didn't, maybe I wouldn't have gone to Australia. Who knows? Who cares? What's done is done, and I'm better for the experience and learning as a result. And hopefully anybody taking the time to listen to this might take away some learnings from it too before it's too late. I stopped drinking after that incident took place in 1999. I've never missed alcohol since, and thankfully, I've never been in trouble with the law again. I don't refer to myself as being sober for X amount of years because that leaves the impression that I might start drinking again. I'm simply a non-drinker, or when asked, I simply say I don't drink alcohol. Well, I think I'll park this one here for now. Hecka, that's taken a long time. As always, if you stuck around this long, listen to me trying to dust off the old memory banks and take a trip down memory lane, thank you very much. If you connected with a part of this experience in your own way, that's awesome. If you didn't connect with it but stuck around anyway, thank you again. And if you didn't like it, again, oh well, too bad, so sad. To those struggling at this time, the message is always the same. Keep turning up, stay in the fight, put one foot in front of the other, and take one day at a time. Be kinder to yourself and know that it's okay to not be okay. Know and trust that things can, do, and will get better if you want them to, and if you're willing to endure these lonely and seemingly miserable times. I promise you the sun will shine again. There are better days ahead, and those better days are always closer than you and I think, even though it might not feel like it. There is a light at the end of that tunnel, so keep going. As always, go always a little further. Remember who dares wins and who cares wins. And until the next upload, there's a big mana wave coming from me to you, filled with my aroha, respect, appreciation, and gratitude for you all.